Hydrogen is the simplest and most abundant element found in the universe. It is present on Earth as a biatomic form, H2, and it's present in a number of different environments here on Earth. Well, primarily hydrogen is present as this bimolecular molecule. It is associated with a number of different environments. So it can be found, for example, in petroleum deposits. It can be found as a free hydrogen gas. And it can be found complexed in a number of different environments. For example, hydrogen dissolved in water. So what is hydrogen? It's the most abundant element in the universe. It's also the simplest element. It contains one proton and one electron. And that's why we like to show it in a very simplified format. It's a colorless, odorless, tasteless, non-toxic gas found in nature, as I mentioned, as H2. And you find H2 naturally. It's naturally in the soil. It's naturally in small amounts in the water. It's naturally, there's a very minute amount in the air that we breathe. But you can find higher amounts, for example, in oil wells or in deposits at the bottom of the sea that have trapped hydrogen. So it is available on our Earth as H2. So we know it as H2. Turns out it's a powerful antioxidant, but not too powerful. And this was one of the principal findings that was made in Japan by Professor Ota. He did an amazing study where he found that not only was hydrogen an antioxidant, that is, it was able to neutralize oxidative capacity in the cell, and I'll show you what that means in just a moment, but it was not too powerful because there's some very natural oxidants in our cells which are very important for signaling in the cell and for regulation of gene expression, so regulating our genes and so on. So it's important if we use an antioxidant that it's not too powerful. So it can neutralize or reduce very dangerous oxidants in our cells, and these dangerous oxidants account for a number of different problems, particularly in chronic illnesses. We have an excess of these produced in both acute and chronic illnesses. So it's something that we have to maintain control over in terms of maintaining control over our health. And the important thing, as I mentioned, hydrogen does not interfere with the signaling systems within the cell. So there's some very minor oxidants in the cell that are important in signaling and controlling gene regulation and so on. We don't want to interfere with those because that can cause catastrophic events. Well, we can take in hydrogen in a number of different ways. We can take it in as a gas, for example. We can take it in as a saline mix, or we can take it in as hydrogen-enriched water. Now, by far the simplest way to take in hydrogen is with hydrogen-enriched water, just by ingesting it, just by drinking. Probably the most dramatic health benefit is the fact that hydrogen is a very good antioxidant. So during problems with our health, for example, or during aging, or during other situations, acute and chronic illnesses, we overproduce oxidants in our system. And hydrogen is a very effective way of reducing the effects of those oxidants. It's also a very strong anti-inflammatory agent. And so there are a number of different ways that hydrogen can benefit us in terms of our health. Oh, it's absolutely safe. You know, one of the exciting properties of hydrogen, particularly in hydrogen-enriched water, is that it is extremely safe. You know, hydrogen has been used for a long time, many, many years, in commercial diving, for example, where divers have been exposed to long periods of time to hydrogen, much higher concentrations than we actually see in hydrogen-enriched water. So its safety record is absolutely excellent. So hydrogen is extremely safe. You know, and this is one of the things that we can all say about hydrogen, is it is very, 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 very safe. And in fact, before I went to college, I worked as a professional diver. And we actually used hydrogen in our gas mixtures for deep diving. And it's been used commercially in deep diving for many, many years, ever since the 1930s. They've been experimenting with different gas mixtures to prevent decompression sickness, or the bends, in professional divers who work for long periods of time at great depth. So hydrogen has been put in the mixture with helium and oxygen, mostly not only to delete out the oxygen, but also to provide other properties as well. And so one of the more popular mixtures for deep diving is a mixture of hydrogen, helium, and oxygen, removing completely the nitrogen. So obviously it's safe because of the use of hydrogen since the 30s in a high pressure environment. So the partial pressure of hydrogen is much, much higher than it is in ambient use. And so if it had any possibility of causing harm, we would have known about it over the years from thousands and thousands of professional divers that have used hydrogen in the mixtures of gas. So its safety record is well documented in gas mixtures, and there's been no safety issues in all these years. It's extremely safe when used in water, like hydrogen water. And of course, here we have hydrogen water. And has there ever been a case of damage of anybody from hydrogen water? No. It's very, very safe. And I think that's another thing that you can brag about with hydrogen water. It is completely safe to use, completely safe to consume, and so on. Well, research into hydrogen has been ongoing for a number of years. But I think the most interesting discovery was made in Japan by Professor Ota in Tokyo, where they actually found that hydrogen was an excellent antioxidant. And from those studies on, we and other people have been investigating the role of hydrogen, not only as an antioxidant, but as an anti-inflammatory agent. Inflammation and autoimmunity. Now, one of the things that hydrogen could do is reduce inflammation. And so there are a number of diseases associated with it. I've just listed a few examples here. Inflammatory bowel diseases, inflammatory muscle diseases, arteriosclerosis, for example. The list goes on and on. But hydrogen can be useful in reducing inflammation. So as a general health property, it can reduce inflammation. And there's some other autoimmune diseases that have inflammation as an aspect of the disease, like rheumatoid arthritis, sarcoidosis, and so on. Multiple sclerosis. All these are very debilitating diseases. And what we want to do is help provide healthy cells and tissues. And that's what hydrogen helps to do. In inflammation, for example, one of the things that happens in inflammation is that cells, immune cells that are in the blood, receive signals from a wound site, and they respond to those signals, and they invade out of the blood vessel, and they normally elicit a response to that wounding environment. And they produce what are known as inflammatory cytokines. And these inflammatory cytokines are just signals. They signal cells and tissues and so on to try and initiate the repair process and try and warn other cells that there's something going on here. There's infection, for example, in a wound, or other problems associated with the wound. And so one of the things that can happen is this can get out of hand. And this inflammation can cause tremendous problems. So you want to try and control the inflammation as much as possible. And so hydrogen helps in that regard. And here's the situation, rheumatoid arthritis, where inflammation of the joints is a major problem. It's not the only problem with rheumatoid arthritis. There are lots of other problems associated with rheumatoid arthritis, but at least the inflammation part of it is helped by using hydrogen. So there's a study here that I'm quoting with 20 patients with rheumatoid arthritis that drank hydrogen-enriched water for 12 weeks, and the hydrogen-enriched water reduced the markers found in the blood for rheumatoid arthritis, reduced the symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis, and it turns out the patients with early RA, early rheumatoid arthritis, actually responded better than the patients that have had arthritis for a long time. Well, that's understandable because there's less damage, permanent damage, in early patients compared to late patients. You know, hydrogen has this very natural property where it can dissolve into and move across cell membranes. And of course, cell membranes separate every cell in our body. And even the central nervous system, which is separated by the blood-brain barrier, hydrogen can penetrate that. So essentially, hydrogen can get into any compartment within our body. Well, that's true. I mean, the cell membranes, for example, that's one of my important topics that we developed in the early 70s. But I must say that hydrogen is a very, very interesting molecule in terms of its ability to penetrate not only into cells, but into the organelles inside cells and passing through various membranes. And therefore, it can virtually go everywhere in your body. And I think that's important for its health benefits. Well, it is, and it can penetrate very easily into every compartment of a cell, and that's not true for most other antioxidants. But there's another property of hydrogen which makes it unique, and that's that it's not an overly strong antioxidant. Some antioxidants are so strong that they suppress all oxidants within a cell. And I'm telling you that that is not good, because some minor oxidants are very important in terms of cell signaling and gene regulation. And so we don't want to affect those processes in our cells. And so hydrogen doesn't affect those processes. It really goes after the most bad or strongest oxidants in the cell and inhibits those. Now, how does hydrogen get inside cells? Well, hydrogen has this very unique property that other antioxidants don't have. It can penetrate the cell membrane of a cell. Here's a cell, and this green barrier around here is the membrane around the cell, and hydrogen penetrates that fairly easily, and it gets into all the compartments of the cells. It gets into mitochondria, it gets into the nucleus, it gets into all these compartments of the cell, and it does that very easily. And that's a very important feature of hydrogen. So we don't have to invent fancy molecules to help get it in. It just gets in very naturally because of its structure. It will go in places where other antioxidants can't. And a good example of that is the central nervous system, which has a barrier around it called the blood-brain barrier, which prevents a lot of molecules from freely flowing in to our brains. Well, hydrogen can flow in through the blood-brain barrier very easily. So it's a very unique molecule in that respect, because there are not too many things that can do that. Our tap water contains a variety of different chemicals, for example. It contains chlorine and a number of other components. So there is some concern about it, and I think this is where hydrogen-enriched water could be very helpful. I think some of the studies that are being planned, which are studies involving hydrogen-enriched water and its role in anti-aging, and its role in exercise performance, for example, are very exciting, and I look forward to doing those studies. Well, we're very interested to see if hydrogen water can actually enhance an individual's performance, but also we want to see if it enhances or increases their ability to recover from exercise. And this is very important because recovery involves the repair process of cells. And hydrogen-enriched water may actually be very useful in that repair process. And I just want to mention a little bit about hydrogen and exercise in sports medicine. And this is kind of a complicated slide that we have to replace this. It's a little too complicated. But what happens when you over-exercise, for example, and you feel tired and run down? There's an excess of the ROS molecules, reactive oxygen species. This occurs when you overdo your exercising. And also, you have to build up your antioxidant defenses, because this is something, when you're training, you have to have a high level of the antioxidant defenses. And here's where hydrogen can help you do this. So there's a couple of, this is one of my last slides, a couple of studies that show this. For example, one was a placebo-controlled double-blind trial using healthy male athletes who drank hydrogen-enriched water post-exercise. So they exercised and they drank hydrogen-rich water. And what they found is that when they did this, they had less problems with cramping. They had less lactate produced. So lactic acid, for example, is one of the things that builds up when you exercise. And the hydrogen actually reduced that. And because they had lower exercise acidosis, which is a buildup of lactic acid. So they had less oxidative stress, for example, and that's very important. And there was another placebo-controlled trial using injured male athletes who took hydrogen, in this case hydrogen tablets. And what they found was that they had faster return from their injuries if they took hydrogen, for example. So it's actually important in helping repair after injury occurs. Well, I think we're going to concentrate on some of the cosmetic benefits of hydrogen-enriched water in terms of anti-wrinkle and skin quality. And that's one area that we're very interested in. But there's some other anti-aging effects as well. And we'll have to go into those in more detail later. Now let's talk a little bit about skin and aging, because as we age, we all know that our skin gets damaged. And it's mainly because of the radiation that on the skin, and also the other things that can do that are chemicals that, in the water and everything that you treat your skin with, in the air, for example, from smog and other things. So your skin is your outer barrier, and it gets really treated very badly environmentally. And so we need to do something about that. And hydrogen water turns out to be very good for protecting the skin, protecting not only against the damage of ultraviolet radiation, which can damage it and cause an increase in these bad ROS again, causing all kinds of damage, or in the case of chemicals, can do the same thing. And without going into detail, this is probably a little more detail than necessary, but the important thing is that we have to maintain the antioxidant systems in the skin in order to prevent aging from occurring, particularly premature aging. So if you want to prevent aging in the skin, you need to protect the skin from these ROS molecules, and hydrogen water is one way to do that. And I have a couple of studies here on hydrogen, skin, and anti-aging. So using hydrogen in the water, bathing in hydrogen water for 90 days, for example, significantly decreased neck, skin, wrinkles, and it stimulated collagen synthesis in the skin. Well, collagen is the matrix that helps support your skin. And when collagen gets degraded and gets kind of floppy, your skin gets kind of loose and wrinkled. And you want that to be really tense and tight. And so hydrogen will help do that. And so it will reduce wrinkles, for example. Drinking hydrogen water shows, in this particular study, a significant decrease in oxidative damage and oxidative enzymes that damage. So this is an important procedure for anti-aging. I'm just about done. So I'm not going to go through radioprotection. I just kind of mentioned that. But aged subjects, for example, that are treated. Subjects that are treated with hydrogen water, for example, show a reduction in skin inflammation and an increase in the synthesis of these collagen molecules. So it's very beneficial. Our hydrogen-enriched water comes from Japan. They're the only manufacturers of hydrogen-enriched water that are suitable for our studies.